Integrated Packaging is an urban-based corrugated packaging business that serves the consumer products industry, primarily using historically underutilized workers inside the inner city. The case is focused on our expansion decision to move into the Detroit inner city after we had been in the New Jersey plant, our first acquisition, for approximately 5 years. And we had built a sustainable, profitable business in New Jersey that was largely based on my leadership skills and styles. And it was whether or not we had the organizational capacity to expand that to a rough environment in Detroit while still maintaining the health of New Jersey.
The first lesson for me is that all workforces are not the same and all inner city workforces are not the same. I think we tend to generalize around the low-wage, low-skilled worker as though they're this cookie-cutter model, and I think the case really does show that no, you go from different geographic spaces with different, the inner city workforce population itself is extremely diverse. And so if you go from what you can go from one group to the next, and with that comes a lot of the cultural historic baggage that creates a very different worker in the present day. So for me, that was one of the most interesting things. The other interesting thing I found about IPC was the fact that it actually is fairly rare when you look at business school cases, is that you're dealing with you're dealing with business owners and CEOs who are both men of color. At the time, you had a president and a CEO who were African American, and that in itself is pretty rare. Key lessons for business school students are there are many of them, and I think I actually think that one of the important things to think about the case in terms of its usefulness for business schools is not to think of it as do not think of it as a corporate social responsibility or a social entrepreneurship case. I mean, it is a business school case. That tells a story about entrepreneurship. It educates students around what the practices are in a medium/small corporation. Now, I think for business school students, I think the usual trajectory for business school students was they go to business school and they go work for a Fortune 500 company. That's not happening that much anymore, and increasingly business school students are either going to work for smaller companies that are a little more entrepreneurial, or they have intentions of becoming entrepreneurs themselves. I think that's an important lesson. It teaches a lesson about where you locate a business. Locating a business in one of the places where people generally don't think of as operating businesses as being inner cities, as opposed to suburbs where everybody's the same, everything's in place very neatly. I think that's another important lesson. It teaches a very important lesson about human resources practices. I think this case actually cuts across a number of different areas that, in the process of teaching those specific business-related areas, also teaches something about social responsibility. The IPC case becomes even more relevant because we're increasingly having to step out of our comfort zones in our economy in general. Increasingly, what the business schools are teaching in terms of, yes, you're going to go through this, you're going to get this degree, you're going to go work for a Fortune 500 company, you're going to make this much money, you're going to etc. down all the way down the line. Those expectations are basically all up in the air right now. And increasingly, you're having to train business school students who are much more flexible and able to adjust to, as I said, different workforces, different locations. I think the lessons of IPC cases are as relevant in New Brunswick and Detroit as they would be in Beijing. I think it's this notion of basically understanding what are the norms of the workforce that you've got, that you're working with, and how do you adapt your practices to help them be more productive and help them get more help to negotiate better buy-in of your workforce into the business that you're trying to create, and help make you a much more successful and much more profitable business. So I think it's much more relevant now.